Thank you very much for coming along today, everyone. My name's Irene Campbell. I'm the Member of Parliament for North Ayrshire and Arran, and I'm delighted to be chairing this event today. So we're looking at eating more greens and how can we restore the balance between our food system, farming, nature and animal welfare. So farmers are central to restoring nature, tackling climate change and ensuring our countryside thrives. They're also vital to producing healthier, more ethical and sustainable food, but they cannot do it alone. So to protect climate, biodiversity, human health and animal welfare, we must shift towards eating more plants and less but better animal products, mainstreaming farmers who are leading the way with regenerative, high welfare and sustainable practices. This panel will explore how Labour can help end dependence on damaging factory farming and instead back the policies and markets that reward farmers for producing food in a way that is fairer for people, animals and the planet. Now we've got an excellent panel here today, whom I'll introduce. So we have Irranca Davies from the Welsh Senedd. We have Sonul Badiani-Hamment. We have Martin Lyons and Andrew Stark, and I'll let everyone introduce themselves and say who they are and speak about the issue at the start of the event. So can I ask you, Hugh, to open the event? Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you very much. Lovely to be with you and lovely to be at a CERA event as well. I'm a big supporter of CERA, have been over the years, because of how it helps policy development ideas and so on. So just thanks for the invitation very much. So I have the longest title in Welsh Government, possibly in UK Government as well. Cabinet Secretary for Climate Change, Rural Affairs, including, by the way, things like circular economy and things like that, and also Deputy First Minister in my spare time. It's quite an interesting amalgam of responsibilities I have, because it spans everything from farming rural affairs through to working across Cabinet on food policy and coordination of food policy, and all the way then into sustaining rural economies as well. So it pulls together all the pieces. So it might seem like a big portfolio, which it is. And we were just reflecting, I used to be an MP, and I was used to working in DEFRA, where you'd walk in and there'd be a room full of 60 people and say, we're your initial team to help you. In Wales, it's 6 people doing food policy and whatever, but we do some really interesting things. So let me touch on some of the things that go, I think, to the heart of this debate fairly quickly. A lot of pressure from within the Senedd, cross-party, to develop a food strategy. Part of it came out of a Conservative bill, actually, Peter Fox's bill, to bring forward a food strategy. Now, strategies are good, but only if you know exactly what you want them to do. And Peter's proposal for a piece of legislation was every damn thing. It was everything, bells and whistles. And the problem with that is you end up risking it being nothing. So what we've done is we've pulled together a community food strategy, and it very much focuses on those local food networks, fresh, affordable, sustainable, nutritious food, and everything that goes from community growers. And just to say to you, we put funding directly into this. We now have over 4,000 green spaces funded through Local Places for Nature. Of those, there are about 300 community orchards, about 400 community growers. So it's everything from that side, and then helping them get into the space of supplying people like Harlech Food and others so that they can get into the procurement space. And that requires a lot of expertise, a lot of heavy lifting, but we're in that space now. But then it goes right up to the farming community. How do we get more and more farmers to see the opportunities that can come from diversifying into horticulture, starting and then growing? Because we know the commercial appetite is out there. We've got a great success in food and drink in Wales. We can build on this into edible horticulture as well. So the community food strategy is very much focused, and it draws on the work of those great thinkers that have been out there in the Welsh community, how we strengthen local food networks. And it's all those things of procurement, the clever interventions where Welsh Government can support the procurement chain to make this happen, but all the way through to not just food banks, but food pantries, food growing, community growers, and all of that. Now, this is work to do. I'm not telling you that we've solved it, but that's the journey that we're now on. We also have a cross-government approach, which I think is really helpful on this, and that's pulled together in a document called Food Matters Wales. And it is literally how you embed this within local government, planning policy, transport, logistics, all of that. Because food shouldn't sit just in my department. It is the whole piece. So it's what we do in schools, what we do in the prison estates, what we do in all of those aspects. So there's a real cross-government mission. The Food Matters Wales strategy is taken forward by a forum, which is cross-government forum on it. I'll touch on a couple of other bits there very, very briefly. This ties in as well the work that we're doing with the Healthy Weight, Healthy Wales approach. Now, with that, we're looking at the dietary aspects within schools, but also wider as well. How we work with communities, with schools, building on the stuff we're doing with the free price. It's great to see UK government now stepping into that space with getting back into the space of free meals in school. So we were slightly ahead of this within Wales. We're doing that, but we need to make sure that food also is fresh, locally sourced, and so on. So we keep on working on that. None of this happens overnight, but you keep on working in that direction. And the final thing I want to touch on is we have a relatively underdeveloped edible horticulture sector within Wales compared to places like some areas like the east of England and so on. It hasn't been the convention. We have masses of pasture land, which is good for grazing and so on and so forth. But actually, we also have lots of land, including outside of agricultural land, that could be used for edible horticulture and then actually put in fresh produce on plates. So one of the ways that we've done this is through a series of grants that we've upped the ante on now. So we have small horticultural grants to start up entrepreneurs, small growers within this. And then we have the bigger ones for those who are already in the space and want to grow that even bigger. And we're doing this, by the way, not only outside of farming, but in farming through Farming Connect, which is our advice service. So Farming Connect Horticulture. And it was great to see at the Royal Welsh Show, biggest and best show in the whole of Europe. Royal Welsh Agricultural Show now has an horticultural part for the last 2 years within it. And the number of farmers as well as community growers have come in saying, how do we do this then? Why should I get into this? It could be good for my bottom line and for stability over those seasons where some things are up, some things down. So we're working on that. So a lot of good stuff going on in this space. And just to give you an idea of the scale of it in horticulture, the Wales Horticultural Planning Working Group, the people who take this forward, we're all small in Wales, okay? So this is not like the 60 people, but we're good small teams. We've got 660 businesses, including farm businesses, now working with us, 950 individuals engaged, 335 fully funded one-to-one growers, one-to-one tailored meetings that we've done. And we've got some of that tailored support, by the way, is the real nitty-gritty stuff. It's what do you need to do with soil, pest control management, planning to get your business up and going, and more. So we've got a hell of a lot more to do, but I think we're on the right journey, and we're starting to grow horticulture in Wales. And the more we do of this, both from the community growers right up to the larger scale, then the more it'll become just commonplace, and then we'll have fresh produce on our plates. Oh, sorry, I missed one thing. Our local food networks. One of the things myself and Jane Hutt has done, Jane Hutt is the Minister for Social Justice. So you can see how this spans across. Me, food, rural affairs, whatever, social justice, getting affordable, nutritious food on people's plate. We've jointly funded local food networks. So that basically means, there's a number of strands to it, but coordination in every local authority area. We got 16 local authorities signed up to it. The other ones are coming on board. They need a bit of refining with their proposals. But the idea is, the new ones of those will pull together those networks locally within local authority areas, coordination of stuff that's going on, everything from the food banks and food pantries up to procurement. The more advanced ones, and some of them are further down this road, we've got large grants going into them so they can do much more complex pieces of work, including building out big scale at procurement and advice and support. So we're on the right road, but a lot more to do.
Well, thank you very much, Hugh, and you've certainly given us plenty to think about and to discuss later on in this session. So I'll now move on to Sonul from PAWS UK. If you would like to give us your 5 minutes of discussion for today's debate.
Sure. Okay. Hi. So I'm Sonul Badiani-Hamment. I'm the country secretary at PAWS UK. Thank you, Hugh, so much for setting the scene so eloquently. I think a couple of points to touch on. You've just said it. Food should be affordable, but it should also be nutritious. The food system definitely need some transformation and some enabling to help us get to that place. So, obviously affordability is important, but affordability and ethics don't have to be a trade-off. We can achieve both with the right policy tools. So the solution, for example, is not to push people to spend more, but it's to enable them to make better choices and for food to be accessible. So supporting farmers to produce less but better meat and dairy raised in higher welfare regenerative systems, and regenerative also meaning higher animal welfare for all the co-benefits that reaps actually for our ecosystem, for reducing pollution, for our public health, for reducing antimicrobial resistance. There's so many co-benefits. And we've got to, as quite rightly you've said, use public procurement. We've got to create a stable market. We need the government to lead by example. We need them to be the guide in this transformation, working bottom up, top down, cross-government department, cross-sectorally. And what's the easiest way we can start creating that market is using our own market. Procurement in your prisons, in your hospitals, in your schools. We have the ability to set the pace and the tone that we need for this transformation. And finally, something that's really, really important that we don't maybe talk about enough is consumer choice, and enabling consumer choice with transparency, allowing people to know where their food comes from, introducing mandatory animal welfare labelling. Let people see, for example, how animals are raised and let them choose aligned with their value system. And never, ever forget animals in this debate. If you don't talk about animal welfare, if you don't bring them up, for example, in the land use framework discussions, if we ignore them, we're just going to double lock an intensive system that doesn't work for us. And actually, to reap all of the benefits we as society needs for our health, for our ecosystems, for our planet, for everyone, we have to solve animal welfare too. They are fundamental to this debate.
Thank you very much, Sonul, and I absolutely agree with everything that you said, which you knew anyway, so that's great. Thank you very much. I'll now move on to Martin Lines from the Nature Friendly Farming Network. Over to you, Martin.
Lovely, thank you very much. And as a farmer myself in Cambridgeshire, the role of livestock, the balance of what we produce from our mainly arable system and the role of livestock within that, I think is absolutely critical. And picking up on the points around food production, food for who? Because a lot of, 62% of the wheat we produce in the UK is feeding livestock. If we can just reduce the numbers down, particularly intensified systems where all of the food is imported to them, we could do so much more with our landscape and balance the outputs. So it's about thinking about what are we producing and how. How do we prioritise pulses, lentils, peas, beans and other things? As an arable system, we can build fertility into our soil. We can reduce our fertiliser needs. And actually, then we can have food that we can eat that we're producing. And maybe some of that isn't of the best quality can go into the animal feed to avoid using soya from other parts of the world. And we can become a localised system and a circular system that actually finds the right balance and in the right things we encourage farmers to produce and what we consume. And we've got to kind of step back to the point of what we're currently doing is not sustainable. It is causing huge animal welfare problems, water quality problems, air quality problems. Things need to shift. And for many farmers, that is quite difficult because they've got to really shift their system. So it's about having a joined up long-term path where farmers can see a destination that makes a viable business. Because as farmers, we are trying to run businesses, but we're reacting to the signals of the market and the consumerism that's going on. I joined a march for clean water in London last year, and there was lots of people waving chicken poo banners up. And my solution to them is, if you want less chicken poo in your rivers, eat less chicken. We'll produce less. As farmers, it just changed it. If the consumer changed the diet, as a farmers, we'll change the production system. And we've got to recognise our cheap food system and our cheap meat system is causing many of the problems. I mean, it's not making more food more expensive. Is making sure the food that is causing wider environmental issues pay true cost of production. Because we're paying for it in other places, in poor water quality, air quality. And that means our taxpayers' money is coming in different places. So for me, it's about how do I, as a farmer, produce the food the nation needs, but also the other goods and services, recognising much of what we produce as farmers isn't food. It's all the other stuff. It's animal feed, it's energy crops, it's environmental outputs. And we do need to shift our diet to a system that works within the capacity of our landscape now and in the future. We cannot be sustainable. Sustaining depleted landscapes with poor soil, poor water is no future. It's rebuilding, rejuvenating, regenerating. And we can help farmers do that by putting the signals in place. And governments can do that by first making sure procurement is delivered at standards that are regenerative, really delivering a whole farm approach. Not always, it might mean some bits have to go up in price, but it's reflecting the impact that other price is having, that quality we're doing. And then it's helping farmers find the right animal for the right role. If we want species-rich grassland, mowing it isn't the best thing. Having some sensitive grazing on it delivers really good species-rich outcomes. So it's about helping farmers get animals in the right place. And recognising one of our members up in Cumbria, get the frigging cows out the sheds. That's his favourite saying. Animals that walk on grass and eat grass are the best, healthier things about. Putting them all in the sheds and taking all the food to them adds so many other problems. And it means stepping back and valuing the production in a different way. So we can do more, and many farmers do want to do more, but they need clear signals from governments and the supply chain that join together in setting out a pathway for the better of where livestock fits a healthy landscape and a healthy system.
Thank you very much, Martin, and for providing a farmer's perspective. I'll now move over to Andrew Stark from Eating Better. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Irene, and good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to be here and to have this wonderful view. I'm sorry that you don't get to the wonderful view that we do, but thanks to the fellow panellists and to Sarah for organising this. So I work at the Eating Better Alliance, and we're an alliance of organisations, 70 organisations working on the food system. So we have members who work across things like the retail sector, government policy, farmers and animal welfare charities such as NFFN and PAWS. And I have the joy of working across the food system and seeing many aspects of it. And I think this is a really exciting time to be on the panel and to be talking about food. And in looking at the conference agenda, I think that's reflected in a lot of the other discussions I've seen to do with food and land use and farming. So it does feel like now is the time to be talking about food more than ever. And I think that's also reflected in where we are policy-wise. So Scotland, in the last few years, passed the Good Food Nation Act. In Wales, Hugh's spoken about the work that's going on there. And in England, the UK government recently announced the Good Food Cycle, which is a really exciting time in food policy to put in the strategies and the joined-up thinking that we need to tackle many of the problems that have already been mentioned. But focusing in, I guess, a little bit on the diet question, I don't think the question is whether we should change our diets in order to fix many of the problems that we've heard. The question is how to future-proof against the change that is coming. Because of climate change and biodiversity loss, a lot of the consequences to do with our global food system are already locked in. And our diets are going to change whether we like it or not, unfortunately, because of deforestation. This year was the worst, Martin can correct me, the worst harvest on record this year. And we saw the shock to the food system with COVID. So, things are going to get only, sadly, worse for us. And I think it's important that we look at food and our diets as a way of tackling that and creating a better food system that can future-proof us against that. And resilience has a lot of opportunities. Hugh spoke about public procurement, and a lot of work has gone into researching what are the benefits to future-proofing that can happen. And the other bit I'll just mention as well is sometimes dietary change in food system can be perceived as quite a polarizing topic, farmers versus people, or NGOs versus farmers, and a lot of this. But I think we see on the panel and in the wider food sector that there's way more in common than is sometimes presented. And at Eating Better, we run annual polling, which is obviously just a snapshot, but we've found consistently above 60%, and at this year's results say 66% of people would be open to changing their diets and reducing the amount of meat consumption. So it's not always this black and white picture that is sometimes presented. And I think it's important that we work with as many people, and particularly the people who are disadvantaged. We touched on poverty, and that will be something we'll get into. The people who are excluded from the food system and how we can restore it in a just way. And just to say, we've also, just a little shout out, we've got some materials and some printouts of that public attitude survey and some other things by the exit. So as you leave, please do pick up a copy.
Thank you very much, Andrew. There's been a really good opening remarks in the panel. I think for me, procurement is key to a lot of this. And in Parliament recently, we had an event where representatives from Denmark came along, where procurement made up a huge part of their procurement strategy, which is actually something that's very worth considering. And the other thing for me as well is labelling, and we've touched on that, because many people are consuming products without an actual knowledge about how they've been produced. Animal welfare is a topic that people in the UK care about animals, but then if we start to look at what we do to the animals that are particularly in the food system, then we don't always look after them very well. So I'll leave that for now. So I'll move over to, I'll ask 2 or 3 questions and then I'll put it out to everyone who's here. So I suppose, first of all, the cost of living crisis is making price a focus of consumer choices more than ever when it comes to food. What do you think that the government can do to enable people to afford a healthy and sustainable diet? And I'll start with you, Andrew.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And as I sort of mentioned there, it's a big consideration, particularly in the Alliance. And I thought I'd just set the scene a little bit about where we are at this conference centre. One of our members, the Food Foundation, have recently published a dashboard which shows health and food inequalities across all of the constituencies of the UK. And in Liverpool Riverside, Kim Johnson's seat, 50% of children live in relative poverty and 49% of people live in areas of high food insecurity. That's where we are today. So, and you can explore that, and I think it does just show the scale of poverty that is out there. But we know a lot of the things that do work to alleviate this and to bring people back into the food system. So a couple of things, the social welfare element is definitely one, and the 2-child benefit cap is a blocker to the current state of poverty in the UK, as well as human rights-based approach to food. So the right to food is a human right that everyone in the UK has, but because it's not enacted and enshrined in UK/England law, we don't have that right available to us. But we can see across countries elsewhere where these social welfare policies have worked. So Brazil recently was removed from the UN hunger map, which is a brilliant win. 40 million people lifted out of poverty because the government made investments into social welfare and food-related policy areas. So I think it's really important that we view investment in food not as a burden, but as an investment in our children, in our families, to bring down the cost of living. Because, and just finally to touch upon some of the innovative things as well. There's many different ways of spending the money. There's very exciting things like fruit and veg prescriptions as a way of increasing fruit and veg consumption rather than direct cash provision. And also, as Hugh will know, a pilot in Wales called the Welsh Veg in Schools, where they're putting organic cucumbers and fruit and veg into schools. And not to show nepotism too much, but my brother is one of the farmers involved in that pilot. So it's really exciting to see his organic cucumbers on school plates, and they do taste, you can taste the difference. And that's, So I'll pass back to you, Irene.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I'll move on to Hugh, and you might want to speak about that project, Hugh.
It's a really good project, and I think it's got scope for growing it, for expanding it as well. I think it's been a success. Everybody's been touched by it, but it's a real practical innovation, because we can talk about the stuff, but actually doing it on the ground and showing that it works, and then by demonstration, others go, how do we get involved with this? But the other thing with this is, I mentioned Harlech, but we've got 2 major distributors in Wales in the food procurement space. Both of them now, with Welsh Government support, are right in the space of helping with access to those, not to smaller farmers who are diversifying, but actually community growers as well. They're actively in that space. They're not doing, we're a commercial organisation, so leave us alone. They're saying, we want fresh Welsh produce on the tables. We will help you, Welsh Government, with a bit of your help from, we've got some very expert teams in how we do that, and we are expanding that. But this question of affordability is critical in all of this. It's what I say for good reason very often. It's I feel like it's the Merthyr question, because all the good things we're talking about, if that means everything is 10% more expensive, well, frankly, with the cost of living crisis, that is tough. When you're in the South Wales valleys or anywhere else where you're struggling to get food on the table, affordability, and also, by the way, when you also have supermarkets and retailers This is not having a big go at them, because actually we're working with them now in Wales to do more on supporting healthy options with more healthy choices. But the tradition of you get the 2 for 1 on the stuff that's crap. Sorry. That I love to eat and stuff my face with, but it's not great for you and it's not good for you, and if that's what you're doing. So how do we switch that within the retail offer so that there's more healthy food available and also more fresh food available on those 2 for 1, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing is, I think, in this as well, it's dealing with food surplus so that it's not food waste. So we are doing some great things on this, and we should not be in any way shy in saying this is a good way of doing it. So instead of having waste going, actually turning that in, not simply into food banks. You know, we often have this argument, we should not have food banks, but food banks are a necessity. But if you look at some of the innovations now around food pantries, which are to do with food literacy, it's not just, here's the stuff that instead of going to waste, as opposed to poverty, it's a waste issue. Here's food that you can use, but we also have to equip people with the skills to understand how to do it. Now, I see this firsthand because we use a food pantry up in Caira. Caira is one of the most disadvantaged communities in the whole of Wales, has been for many years. It's got a very good organisation called CDT, voluntary, that collects the food surplus and distributes it. But you will often have people come in and going, how the hell do I use that stuff that's just come from Marks and Spencer's in Cardiff? What is that? How do I cook it? What do I do? So they're actually working, and we're doing more of this now through these local food partnerships about the literacy around food as well, to say we can use this in different ways and simple ways. And I think that helps with affordability. And the other thing is, and I failed to touch on this at the outset, not everybody is a Martin, or in my Welsh perspective, Hayden, from just outside Carmarthen. And Hayden told me this as I was walking the fields. Not every farmer is that far down the line of saying we need to be in that regenerative space. But actually what we can do in government is support the type of farming we want to see that will produce not only, and there is a place for livestock, good livestock that is good for grazing on the type of land that we have. And sometimes we need livestock in different places to actually improve biodiversity in certain patches which are undergrazed, but do it cleverly. But the other thing is supporting sustainable farming, which produces that fresh produce and good produce, and then getting it to the table through procurement affordably as well. Now, this is complex stuff. It really is. There isn't one simple thing you have to do, and that's why the joining together piece is really important. And the other thing I would say in this affordability thing is not thinking it's all done by government or supply chain. We've got good people in Wales who are working on this sort of agenda, like Puffin Foods and First Milk and so on, really pushing the supply chain and their farmers towards this. But it also needs to be with communities, because communities have some of the answers themselves. So if you look at Caira and so on, it's also the place where we have one of the best community growing places in Wales, in Caira. And people who come along there grow their own food, know how to use it, as well as dealing with food waste from other sources as well. So it's complex, but we need to keep the focus on this in a very comprehensive way.
Thank you very much, Hugh. I'll now move to Sonul.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Hugh. And I think one thing that Martin touched on actually when you opened was about those hidden costs as well of affordable, cheap food. I think we really need to address that, you know, environmental destruction, intense animal suffering, and public health risks. So cheap isn't always good. Affordable food needs to be good food. It needs to be nutritious, as you say. And you're absolutely right that we also need the government to play their role here. And that is in ring fencing and increasing funding available actually as well for the transition that we want to see. So it's backing British farmers to deliver that transformation of the food system, to deliver affordable, nutritious food. So I think that is a really important topic to bring into the room. So yeah, and also of course, you know, thinking about protecting our standards in trade deals. There's so much we're talking about with all the trade deals that go on, and then we're, you know, allowing the import of food that completely undercuts our own markets. There's absolutely no sense to that. So it's, you know, creating the right markets, realizing actually what good, affordable, nutritious food is, and then funding that transition to it. Absolutely, procurement. We talked about it so much. Procurement. It's the first market that we need to secure here in our own country at home. So lots of things we can do, pulling the right levers for the right food system.
Thank you, Sonal. And over to you, Martin, for your view on the discussion so far.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. And I think we've got to. The cost of food per wage packet is getting smaller and smaller because there's all the other stuff in life we've got to fund. So, and it's the one choice you make every day. Your phone bill, your electricity bill, you have to pay every month. So people make choices, and unfortunately, some of those choices are not always the right ones. And we've got to look at planning systems. If children coming out of schools, when they walk past fast food restaurants and everything else before they get to a proper food shop, how do we get the planning? So it is really complicated. So it's about working in a bigger picture kind of thing. But food empowers people so much more. It's the engine you put in yourself to get you to work and get you to school and get you going. So how do we make sure those standards are the right standards and promote that, but also penalise and regulate the bad stuff? We've got to kind of get that out the system or moved along and improved. And I think for that is really working with supply chains, with procurement, with the bigger picture. I work with a number of supply chains and giving them support to drive better outcomes and reward farmers. Because there's not a lot of money in the food system. We often hear the supermarkets are making all this money, but when you look at the ingredient profit all the way through, there's very little. And a lot of it's at huge risk of climate impacts and other things. So we've got to do this collectively with government, with supply chains, with farmers, and with our consumers. As farmers, we've got to get out and explain what we can produce and where, because then we can really get the value of food really produced in the right places. We should not be producing loads of food in one part of the country to export it out of the country to import. So it's not just about the standards here, it's about driving positive change to people and communities around the world through our procurement, our supply chains. And I think so much of it can be done, but it's difficult and we've got to have those conversations. And having panel discussions and being in rooms, we can do this together and we can get a win for everybody and make sure citizens have affordable food for the future.
Can I just ask you a question, Martin, if you don't mind? As a UK farmer, how do you feel about the potential trade deals and some of the discussions that are happening in relation to deals that we're making since we left the EU?
So trade deals that allow imported products below my standard of production, allowing products to be used that I'm banned to being used because they cause environmental harms, seeing animal welfare, animal products coming in that are caged or reared in ways, that just should not be happening. You cannot ask a marketplace, a producer, to produce here where the minute the cost goes up a little bit, it is supplied by something completely different at a lower standard. We've got to get that fixed. And if we're going to align to EU standards and other standards, we need to do this not just in the UK, but across wider parts, across Europe, across other partners, to say those systems have got to stop and we're going to buy at this value and then we make the market do the work for us. And that doesn't mean then government has to fund a lot more money because the market has a standard it wants to trade at that delivers those outcomes.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask one more question and then I'll put it out to the floor to Emma. So I think what I would like to ask you all is about a food strategy. So how do we help deliver a better balance for food production, nature and animal welfare all in one strategy? It's a short question, but it's actually asking a lot. So I'll start with you, Martin, if that's okay. We'll come across.
So my first bit would be, is it a food strategy or a nutritional strategy? Okay. We need to think of the big, what do we need to feed people? Where can we produce that or procure that from? And then we design a system that engineers our landscape to feed people healthy food from a healthy system. So it's about having a strategy. And across the UK, as we've, post-Brexit, we've devolved agriculture policy. I don't want to compete with someone on the other side of a border in the UK that is paid a different price, but also undermines the supply chain and other bits. So it's having a national nutritional strategy of what can we produce, how do we shift the system to get that working. Then me as a farmer, I recognise what I can produce and we'll empower farmers to grow the food to feed the nation.
Okay. Thank you. Sonul?
I think we've said a lot of it, but it really is that, bottom up, top down, cross-government departments, cross-sectoral approach. And it's the holistic way of looking at our food system and defining the diet that we want to see and then delivering against it. And that's including, bringing in some measurable impacts as well. So, for example, I think eating better, you want to see a 50% reduction by 2030. It's time to start having a really grown-up conversation about these things. I think people are afraid about talking about the consumer side of it. But like you said, we're already there. We're already in this food crisis. We're already seeing the worst yields that you've ever seen. So it is time to talk about those targets, to deliver against them, and to remember that it is all interconnected. You know, we talked about at the beginning, animal welfare. Animals are also central to this, central to the benefits that we want to reap across our society, across public health, across the environment. Every single thing is linked together. It's that holistic approach, and it's delivering it across society together.
Thank you. I think just to touch on when I mentioned the Danish food strategy is actually a very interesting example for people to look at. If people are familiar with it, then I think it would be, there's no reason why we shouldn't take lessons from that, because it's worked very well. If you don't know anything about it, it's definitely worth checking out. I'll move to you, Hugh.
Yeah, so I'm going to start by saying we don't need another strategy in Wales. It's in place. What we need to do is drive this home. So the Healthy Wales approach on diet and nutrition, the social procurement strategy that we have. So we're slightly ahead of the game here at the moment. So we have built in now that it doesn't have to be simply lowest cost. It's the wider value, economic, social, environmental, into our procurement. That's why our big companies now are working with us on it, because we built it in. We said if there's public money going into procurement, this needs to reflect those wider value chains, including the primary producers, but all the way through it as well. But we are keen to work, by the way, with the UK government. They're devising a food strategy. We're keen to work with them, but in case we've got any colleagues in here, any ministerial colleagues, not to be led by, because we think there's a learning process here between devolved nations. Scotland have done some brilliant stuff. We think we're doing some really good stuff that will really lead the way. The defining thing of us is we've got really strategic thinking, but I'm damned if I'm going to write another strategy and ask my small teams to do that. What we need to do is build out what we've got in place, the local food networks, taking forward that local ecosystem that we can build up, the procurement and everything else there. The piece that also needs to pill into this in Scotland, England, whatever, is what we do, not just with farming, but farming and landscape management as well. And that is where the thing that I've undersaid today, back in June, we launched the basic parts of the sustainable farming scheme. This is different from what's going on in England or in Scotland or in Ireland, because it takes a whole farm and a whole nation approach. What do I mean by that? Whole farm, because it is a type of farming. Not everybody's a Martin, not everybody's a Hayden, but it puts in place the incentives in quite a complex, but I hope for when we bring forward the detail for farmers in an understandable way, that incentivizes the right type of growing in the right type of place. And it does it on those environmental, climate resilience aspects as well, because you're right. We talk about livestock numbers. Why do we talk so much about productivity? For a farmer, it's the value of that animal when it goes to market. It's not just the numbers, it's the value of that animal. And if we can do things such as, for example, the right tree in the right place, so there's a shelter belt, when we get the drought and the incessant sun, that impacts on the productivity of the animal. Why aren't we providing those shelter beds in the right place there and doing those sort of things? So this is a win. So that sustainable farming scheme is a whole farm approach, and it is to do with soil quality and et cetera, and also tackling water pollution. But it's also a whole nation. We've described it as a new contract between the people of Wales and the farmers of Wales. It's not for us to tell an individual farmer exactly what to do, but what we can say is where there is public money going in, and we should, by the way, put public money into farming, but it's for doing a number of good things, including brilliant food production. Because I have to say, at the moment, Welsh Food and Drink is a rip-roaring success, export market and domestically. People want to see that red dragon or the flag because there is a perception that it is produced in a green and pleasant land. We need to make that a hard reality right across the piece, because it's not universally good. But we can build on that. And so all of these pieces need to come together. I don't need to write a new strategy. We need to apply the strategic thinking from diet, nutrition, affordability, procurement into everything we do. That's the challenge.
Okay, thank you, Hugh. And over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Irene, and echo a lot of what has already been said. I guess for us as food stakeholders, I think we have to get food and food strategies and food politics further up the political agenda to make it an exciting topic. There's a lot of different priorities in governments, various governments across the UK, and I think that viewing food as an interconnection and as an exciting topic can really bring together a lot of the different, sometimes competing priorities. On the specifics of a UK government food strategy, we'd like to see, as Sonul mentioned, a target on reduction of meat and dairy consumption, and also a clear definition of a healthy and sustainable diet. A lot of work has been done on what a healthy diet, but the intersection between health and sustainability is not quite there yet. Perhaps legislation, if needed, which Daniel Zeichner, previous minister, did say he would do it if needed. So I think it's important to look at all of the options available to us. But as you said earlier, strategy is one part, and having a strategy is one thing, but the implementation and monitoring of a strategy to measure success is a much harder thing. And that's why targets and structures to strategies give us a framework in which to operate in, because the food system is overwhelming. There is a lot of interconnections, but I think bringing it together in a joined up way it is one potential avenue that the food strategy could explore. And just to touch upon beans and pulses, which is a really exciting area, and as Martin will know, as a farmer, there's a lot of supply chain opportunities. I was at Groundswell Farming Conference earlier this year, and I learnt on one of the Food Foundation's panels that there is currently no canning or tinning facilities in the whole of the UK for beans and pulses. Yes. That is an enormous market that is untapped. I know. I had to double check, but it is correct. So we're all talking about beans and pulses, and it's true. Yeah. But there's a massive market opportunity, which speaks to a lot of the growth agenda within the current UK government.
It's that infrastructure that needs to come in with it.
Exactly. And then just the final point, talking about the food environment and choices, I think is very good. But I think we need to look at the environment in which people experience the food system. And Cardiff, for example, recently banned junk food advertising on public property, which is a really exciting development. So those are the sort of actions that do actually make changes to how we experience the food system and do tackle a lot of the different competing priorities that different governments across the UK have.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So I'd now like to open up to questions. So
can I just leap in just for a second, because he raised a really important point. You can only grow this edible food, horticulture, whatever, if you've also got the infrastructure, the splicing, the dicing, the processing, the storage, and so on. So I mentioned earlier on the local food partnerships. The bigger grant funding for that, for the more mature ones that are already up there, is specifically says, if you want to get into the space of the processing and so on, these big grants are there for you to do it. So what we need then is that stepping up from the grassroots to say, in our area, we're ready, let's go for it, because we've recognised that is a barrier now to increasing this. So we're putting the money in. It's £2 million. So Wales isn't a huge country of the scale of England, whatever. £2 million can go a long way. Yeah.
Thank you, Hugh. So I'll take this question first. Yeah, thanks.
So my name's Sandy Kipper, I'm from RABI.
Yeah, there's a mic coming.
Oh, there's a mic coming. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sandy Kipper. I work at RABI, which is a farmers' charity. So we know at the core of our food system is farming people. And I'd like to thank Hugh in particular for the ongoing work on the health and well-being of rural and farming communities in Wales. What lessons can we learn on respect, empathy and understanding of farming people in England to help address their well-being gap?
Thank you. What I'll do is I'll take one question at a time for the moment, and then we might have to take them in groups, but we'll take that one for the moment. Thanks. Do you want to start, Martin?
Yeah, I think for England, having a clear strategy plan of policy and other things, not stop-starting. In Wales, I congratulate you on bringing out a scheme that has a whole farm approach and clear outcomes. In England, we've got multifunctional stuff going on and stopping and starting. We need to join that up so farmers can be supported, and they support each other then in a knowledge exchange and a practices that deliver those outcomes. What we don't want to see is seeing farmers isolated, the good and the bad or either way, but actually we want to bring as many as possible along that journey, and those that are isolated then, give them additional support to accelerate what they're doing. And many farmers are up for it, but we don't want to see them demonised for a system they're currently locked in because they've got debts that invested in something they thought was right 10 years ago. So we've got to sort of bring them along with us and make sure all farmers are connected to this change.
Thank you. Sonul?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. And I think a lot of this as well is horizon scanning and getting on with it. So, for example, we've been talking about cages in this country for how many years? It's one of the cruelest systems in farming, and it's also not delivering for farmers, right? So you've got low margin, high volume systems, and it's making, they're locked in, and it's making them harder actually then to shift to the systems we're talking about here. So, you know, I think it is about getting ahead, and we're not even really ahead. The market's already moved on. The EU will move on. We've now got the SBS agreement. Everything's moving except us. So we've actually now got to actually support the farmers to get on with it, to fund that transition, to phase people out of the systems that they are locked into, to say we back you to deliver the food system that we're talking about, that you're in this room and work together. And I think this isolation we speak about, it's because at the moment, you know, people are also stigmatized for being in a group over here and a group over there and a group over here. We're all working together. We all care about food, right? We all also, I think, farmers care about animals. They don't necessarily want to see that cruelty either, but again, they're locked into delivering with these tools. So I think we need to help people to get out and to live with the right tools in place.
Thanks, Sonul. You?
So I'm just going to start by saying, Sandy, as well, my thanks to you and other organisations, Ravi and others who are out there working with farmers on a day-to-day basis and within the farming community as well. I mean, the work doesn't go unnoticed, and there's a lot of pressures, I've got to say, out in the farming community generally. One of the most rewarding things of my experience over the last year as somebody who didn't intend to come back into government but came back in to do a job, and it isn't finished yet, is that I took very much in the spirit and literally the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. People often say, that was one of the reasons why I came back to Wales, this strange nebulous piece of legislation. What's that all about then? When you're an MP, you go, that doesn't do anything specific, does it? Well, part of the approach of that means you have to co-produce solutions. So what does that mean? Unpack it in a very Welsh way. You sit down together and you go, do we all agree what we're trying to achieve here? Right, we've got different ways of doing it, but all we first agreed. We need to do a type of farming that is to do with sustainable farming. It's good for farming as well, for climate resilience. It'll be good for your animals. It'll be good for the river quality. And we can produce this wonderful food that we do in Wales. We all agreed, right? Do we all agree we need to change? Right, now let's kick through the ideas. So we have genuinely spent, and I'm not over-egging it here, hundreds upon hundreds of hours working through this. But it's got us to a place where that way of working has been not the minister saying, I'm going to do this stuff to you, but actually, even where we've got disagreements, to say, can we disagree agreeably on this? I'm going to have to make a call, but are we 90% together on this? And that's the way. And I think that's given some certainty back to people as we try to re-engineer not just farming, but the food system, doing that way of working with them. It takes time and it takes effort, and it's never quite over. But I'm excited getting to the end of this year, how much there's a desire from the farming community and environmentalists and welfare charities to say, can we keep this style of working going? Because it is inordinately taxing and tiring, but we get to a really good outcome because of it. And there's something within that. I'm not one to teach other ministers how to do it, but I was a DEFRA minister as well. And I think it's been a learning experience for me. Do things with people. And if you disagree and you have to make a call, do it, but explain why. Work on the same evidence. Work on the same outcomes, and you'll get to a good place there where everybody's bought in and they feel part of the solution.
Thanks, you. Andrew?
Yeah, just quickly, thanks for the question, really important one. And yeah, walked into Labour conference today and I didn't miss the farmer protests as we entered as well. So it is a very hot topic, respect and empathy in farming. I think it comes partly, many reasons, but down to how we view food. At the moment, food is commodified, and sometimes the producers and the people are commodified in that system. So I think we need to rethink what Martin said earlier about, you know, health and nutrition is part of food. Beyond just food security, it's also about viewing food as more than just a commodity. And giving farmers as much help beyond just funding for this transition, so things like peer-to-peer networks, knowledge exchange, farm advice, to really help the people who are delivering a lot of the change transition into whatever food system we hope we can deliver through the strategies that we've spoken about.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll take more questions. I'll take from the gentleman in the blue shirt and then...
The question is, I run a country estate in Kent, in one of the most poorest deprived areas, the whole southeast of England. And hearing what people are saying about food waste is really interesting and what can be done. And having been a large vegetable supplier to the supermarket chains many years ago, what I wanted to make is not is they do, because of price fixing, which is almost unique in Britain compared to the rest of Europe, when you have a glut, the price does not go down. So therefore, actually, a lot of the food waste is on farm because the food supermarket basically emails and say, we don't want it. So the question I have for the panel, and it's a real challenge, but how do you see that working with the supply chain, especially the supermarkets, to have more, the prices reflect more supply and demand like the rest of Europe, which would actually in turn reduce the waste and actually provide, when there is a glut, will provide high value, high quality fruit and veg at below the price they often charge in the supermarkets because it's perceived that because of the price fixing and it's easier for them to do it that way. So just a question to the panel, do you believe that's a sensible policy? And B, how do you believe you could introduce it?
Thank you for that. I'll start with Andrew.
Yes, it is a sensible, looking at this, sensible policy. I think looking at regulating industry, I think we've seen voluntary measures can only go so far when you look at what happens with the retail environment, but they are a huge, as you sort of outlined, they're a huge part of the food system. Tesco alone, something like 26% of the food supply or food that we buy in the UK comes from Tesco alone. So there's the flip of that is there's a lot of potential, and looking at the different ways of regulating, like the Grocery Adjudicators Act, different measures around regulating that. But I think as well, back to my point about the polarization, I think businesses want this. They've been calling for different regulations themselves on other areas, and I don't always think this idea that regulation is bad for business is one that businesses tend to agree with. So I think we need to work with them and work on that because of the reasons you outlined. And I think at the moment the link between food surplus and poverty needs to be broken. We need to move beyond this very in-out system because it's not going to address the root cause problem which you just outlined. So.
Can I just check if other panel members want to come in on this, because there's quite a few people want questions, and we've only
got one very quick
minutes,
point.
So
Stop the promotional offers when they're out of season. Do 2-for-1s when it's in season and there's a glut. Because actually there's plenty of food, but you end up chucking most of it away because the supply chain is so rigid. So make sure there's offers on when there's in season and there's an abundance of food, and it'll make it cheaper and affordable for everybody.
That's a good point. More questions, so I'll take it. We've not had a woman yet, so I'll take.
Hi, I'm Anna Coda from Hereford and South Herefordshire CLP, and I've always been interested in wildlife and nature, and by chance and marriage I became a co-owner of a 100-acre farm. I just want to broaden this out. If you look at, for example, what's happened with British bird declines, most of the steepest declines have been in farmland birds, whether it's iconic species like curlew and turtle doves, or more commonplace things like yellowhammers and tree sparrows. And there's lots of changes in British farming since the 1970s that have led to these changes. If you want to really introduce more biodiversity, although all the things you've been talking about will be steps in that direction, we need to go a bit further. And I'm not familiar with the Welsh systems, but I know it's different from ours because obviously we're on the Welsh borders. But the last government absolutely, completely mucked up all the environmental stuff post-Brexit. And I have to say that so far, our own government haven't covered themselves with glory nationally either. But I just wanted, not really a question, but just a note of caution. If you're really interested in biodiversity, we need to go a step further than the sorts of changes that you've been talking about by and large. I mean, Hugh's touched upon some more, though they will take us in that direction. It's much more fundamental if you really want nature recovery.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. I'll just go straight to a question. The man sitting next to you.
Linked, actually. I mean, we farm sheep and cattle, but more importantly, for my point, I am old. I can remember, despite the environmental ravages of wartime production, I don't remember wartime production, but in the 60s, in the 50s, we did have a situation where an awful lot of farming was mixed farming, we did have a large horticultural industry, much of which was linked to local markets.
Yeah.
The reason those things changed was because people didn't want to go bankrupt. You know, unless you've got an economic structure which allows this sort of farming and this sort of horticulture to occur, people have to make a living, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I watch my neighbour taking his 4 or 5 crops of silage off monoculture ryegrass, having chucked the contents of his biodigester on it on a regular basis, while I'm waiting to cut my 1 cut of hay off traditional hay meadows. And you do need to mow grass. Hay meadows are the area, one of the most rapidly depleting areas of habitat. They are meadows. They have to be mowed every year. And you do need to get livestock in the winter. It's a welfare issue. We like to be in our nice warm houses. We don't sit under the hedge trying to shelter from a north wind up to our knees in mud. Thank you.
Any other questions? So I'll take the guy in the check shirt at the end.
Thanks. Joss McDonald from the Food Foundation. I was going to ask, how do we keep the issue of food system change out of the culture wars? Because we remember when Rishi Sunak claimed that he'd ditched the non-existent meat tax. I was at Reform Conference about 3 weeks ago, and a representative of a certain large farming organisation, a national farming organisation, said that they wanted to stop imported vegan diets, as if like, eating fruit and vegetable was some foreign concept. So how do we resist that and keep it on the policy?
Thank you for that question. That's there's not one answer to that. I'll ask you, Sonul, to comment
just
on that.
continue to call this out. It's damaging rhetoric. It's ridiculous. You know, this isn't NIMBYism, whatever NIMBYism is. It's ridiculous. These are serious policy issues. You know, we've talked about big issues here: food poverty, public health, the planet we all live on, our existence.
Can I just
call it out?
Yeah.
I would. The culture war doesn't exist. It's a fabrication of divide and conquer tactics to pit different areas of the society and the food system against one another. And I think it's really important we keep that. We reject that framing and we reject those arguments, because all it's going to do is hold us back from exactly doing what you just said, Sonul, and getting on with the kind of grown-up business of actually trying to fix society. So I think that's what I would say to.
As chair, can I comment? I know I'm the chair, but I think it's divisive, and the strategies for everybody, irrespective of where you live or how you vote or whatever the strategy is for everyone. And just Martin.
Add to that, the current food system with high inputs, mowing lots of grass, and I get there is the role for mowing, and it's that complexity of we need a bit of everything. But the current system is driving no profitability to farmers, bad outcomes, high input systems, lots of nitrogen. And actually many farmers are now waking up that that's leading to their lack of profitability. So they are keen to shift and change. And the biggest impact to my business is the changing climate. Last year we were washed out. This year we're droughted out. Where is food security in the bigger picture when all that goes on? So we've got to face into that, and that means funding and supporting the system, the food system, to work with our environment and our landscapes and our farmers for the future ways. The culture of eat meat, not meat, this, is it food or is it nature? I'm sorry, but we need to be grown up and have them push back and talk about the realities of where we are and where we do need to get to as a society. If we don't invest now, it's a bigger cost in the future.
Thank you.
I'm just going to speak up now, just for a moment, in defence of some of the tricky positioning that some of the national farmers' unions have to do. We have NFU Cymru and FUW, we have Tenant Farmers Association, Nature Friendly Network, whatever. But I do remember about 15 months ago when there were about 5,000 farmers on the steps of the Senate protesting against the then thing. Abby Reader, the deputy leader of NFU, made a powerful speech saying it needs to change, the scheme they got, but actually in defence of climate resilience and the need for the farming community to deal with climate change because it's impacting them. And she was booed. She was booed. Now, she wasn't booed by everybody, But there was a segment there that was fully in the culture war space. Anything to do with climate change, this, that, and the other, just gets denigrated. But the hard reality, it's Martin and everybody else. It's my farmers in West Wales that have been impacted. In West Wales, by not only deluge, but by drought. And it is ruining the soil, their productivity, and everything else. So actually the mission we're on, and I have to stand very steadfast on this, is to say, we're not doing this for, sorry, I know lots of you will say, we're not doing this just for the sake of the planet. We're doing it for food production. We're doing it to protect livelihoods. And there are challenges with this. I do take your point. And I keep coming back to this point. Not everybody's a Martin, not everybody's a Hayden. Hayden's a guy I know in West Wales. He's a fully mixed farming, arable, but he's somebody who's learned over the years and adapted his farming for it. And he has grazing of pasture land, and he adapts year by year what he does. It's a very profitable farm, whatever. But he made the point to me, he said, not everybody's a Hayden here. You've got to work with all farmers to get there. But this is why it's critical as well, to come to your point. You can do the whole lot if you take a whole farm system. If you don't do, the man from the ministry says, this is exactly what you have to do. But if you set the parameters and say, we want policies that are good for biodiversity, good for flood alleviation. So things like, such as river borders. So we've put a hell of a lot of money into the upper River Dee stretch in North Wales here. So in the uplands of the River Dee, where there's completely bald, denuded landscapes with no tree cover, and that water is in excess of 23 degrees in the heat of the summer, where nothing will live within that, actually saying to a farmer, we'll provide the money for it to provide tree cover along the stream. It'll cool the water down, it'll be good for invertebrates, it'll stop the runoff from the land as well into it, and it works. You do flood alleviation, you do biodiversity, and you do good food production as well. So there is a way to do this, but you've got to work with every farmer and every different farmer, and put some expertise as well to help work that way forward. And some of that expertise will be farmers, some of it will be working with environmental groups. Let's get away from this polarisation, because RSPB and others have got some really good expertise within them that can help.
Well, thanks, Hugh. I want to take one final question, because we're at 2:30, but I'll take one final question from women in the yellow shirt.
I just wanted to bring it back to eating more greens, because how are we going to be eating more greens if we don't have enough growers? So there's a massive skills and labour shortage within the horticultural sector. As farmers, we can deliver, but if we don't have the skills coming up, and in the future, how can we deliver the strategy? So my question to you is, how could we incentivise farmers to have more horticultural elements on their land through CSAs, or that might be through larger horticultural systems? Like, how can we do that? As I'm a farmer myself, so how can we incentivise more farmers to offer that?
Well, thank you for bringing that nicely round to eating more greens. So I'll give everyone 30 seconds to respond to that. Thank you.
Just very quick, are you, for the person, I used to work at the RSPB, so just to say the birdland decline, very much echo. But in answer to the how to eat more greens, I would say looking at the different models of land ownership as well, when you bring in new entrants, particularly younger people, bringing them into farming by making farming, sort of point I made earlier, an exciting thing, a career that could be for young people rather than something that's inherited. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity, as well as, better market returns, the supply chain issues, and I think public procurement and sort of building on the brilliant work that we see in Wales, so that farmers see themselves as part of a local food system rather than just an exporter to a market that they have no personal connection with. Because I think we are people, and farmers are people, and they value the work, and where they see that food going is really important as well. So in the short time I've got, that'll
So we've not solved this in Wales, okay? We're not. We're coming from a low base of horticultural production, but we're putting the investment in there now, both in terms of horticultural enterprises, small grants and larger ones, but also in terms of the support through Farming Connect brackets horticulture specifically for that. So it is working, and we're doing it through a lot of, as I described earlier, one-to-one support, peer support, and whatever. We also need to do the skills pipeline as well. So both on farm, so working with farmers so they can grow their expertise, but also working with colleges and others. We grow that cadre of people who will come through and see an exciting career in this. And for me, it's exciting because it can be done in many, many parts of Wales. You don't always need, if you like, prime. You don't need our grazing land to do this. You can pick other areas, which could be in Merthyr, to come back to Merthyr. You know, we can do this sort of growing undercover if you've got the right conditions and the right soil. So that's the exciting thing. We've got to grow the skills pipeline for this.
Thank you, Hugh. Sonul?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think, you know, your point here, and Andrew, your point earlier as well about, you know, not having people to can legumes and things. These are things that I didn't necessarily know about walking into this panel. And these are key things that, you know, we have the food strategy first, yes, but then there needs to be a roadmap. How do we actually implement and deliver this? And then, for example, the great work you're clearly doing, providing grants. You've identified there's an infrastructure problem, and now you're making grants available. So if we can actually work together first on what the ambition is that we want to achieve, and then work it out, you know, within that same way we need to do the food strategy, work it out together across sectors and across departments, across communities, how we deliver it together as a country. And then we can start dismantling those barriers to achieve our ambition.
Thank you, Sonul. And finally to you, Mark.
Thank you. I think for those that want to, can do, is access to land. How do they get hold of a piece of land? How do they work with others? Get the skills, the training, the infrastructure putting in, and then make sure there's a home for the produce. So making sure the supply chains. The stuff we grow today is in the marketplace in 6 to 12 months' time. We need to be realistic in how we can, we've got no point just producing more. So how do we make sure through supply chains and procurements and other things, there's an ask and a demand for next year, the year after, so we can invest in growing now for our future.
Well, thank you very much. Can I just say I'm sorry to everyone that didn't get to ask a question, but thank you all very much for coming. And I think there's been a really interesting panel discussion today. So thank you very much to the panel.